this quite a while. Now let's focus on the 30 years a little bit, because it turns out that that answers any question that you or I might have. You might say, is this a man of God? And the answer to that question is, well, you know, he was pastor of this one church for 30 years. Was he faithful in his preparation of messages, and did he really bring God's word versus somebody else's word? And the answer to that question is, he was pastor of this church for 30 years. Did he care about the people? Did he love the people in his flock? He was pastor of the church for 30 years. Did they love him? Well, he was pastor of this church for 30 years. And so it turns out you don't need to give a lot of details about all his interpersonal skills or all his other gifts or something. That one question of the staying power and faithfulness answers it all. Now, Don is a kind of modest person, and he might say, there's another answer to why I lasted 30 years here. He would be the first to tell you that his ministry has always been a joint ministry with his wife, Ann. And he would probably say, you know, I wasn't that much, but Ann was such a refreshing presence that they would put up with any pastor for 30 years so that they could be around Ann. And I think all of us who knew Ann would say, you know, what's going to authenticate heaven for us, how we're going to know we're in downtown heaven instead of just the suburbs, is that Ann Bowen will be there. Don, when he left, he and I used to have breakfast once a month back in the 90s when I was one of the deacons. And he came to one of those breakfasts in 96. He says, Bill, I've decided to retire. And the only thing I could think of to say at that time was, gee, Don, I was kind of hoping somebody else would be chair of the deacons when you said that. But what I should have said is, Don Bowen, you have 17 years more of ministry in the tank, at least. Well, dare you think about leaving us? And he's been the pastor of Cobham Park Church for 14 out of those 17 years. Been a blessing to those folks down there. And his wisdom, he knew we needed a change. When we have our anniversary in 2074, Dave will still be here. I'm not sure where I'll be, but Don will once again be the guest speaker. Join me in welcoming Don Bowen.
If you wonder how long 30 years is, when we came here, Bill Hook and I both had hair. But it's good to be back. I tell you, it's good to be back. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to be here. I love to tell the story about the preacher who was the church was known for its brevity of preacher service. And preachers would stay 1 or 2 years or something like that. And then they got this preacher that stayed for 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. And after a while, he got up the courage to ask someone, how come all the other preachers left after 2 or 3 years, and I've been here 5 or 6 years? And they said, the man said, well, Pastor, it's like this. Some of our people don't like much preaching, and some of them don't think a whole lot about the value of preaching. And to be perfectly honest, some of them don't want into preaching at all. And you're as near nothing as we could find, and that's why we've let you stay that long. But it's good to be back. You recognize some of those charter members who were here and their families, and they're here, and Janice Summerlin, who was here when we were here, and some of the others who've come along the way. But I do thank you for the privilege of being back and being a part of this special anniversary service. I would like for you to know that there's one other member of the family here this morning, and some of you know her because she was with you during that time. And Donna, stand up, Donna. You're on the back row this morning, but you're back there, and this is... She came in 1967 when we came, and has been here ever since, and I'm sure she's been a blessing to you as well. Let me just say this. When you came in this morning, some of you received this Keeping the Dream Alive, Now, you're not supposed to sit there and read that while I'm preaching this morning, because they're going to give it to you when you leave this morning. If by chance I say something you think might be worth remembering, it's all in here, because this is a copy of what I'm going to be sharing this morning. So don't think you can go to sleep and then just say, well, I'll read it when I get home and the Redskins are playing. And you can go to sleep while the Redskins are playing nowadays. But anyway. Let me tell you just a quick thing about that deacon thing with Bill Hook. To tell you how old he is, he works for Noah. You know the man that came over on the boat? He works for him. But he went to work early all the time, and we met at Denny's down on Route 1. At 5 o'clock in the morning, we had a meeting at Denny's on Route 1 so he could be to work on time. And no wonder we both lost our hair. But anyway, be that as it may, it's good to be here. I'm going to read a passage of Scripture this morning, some verses from a passage of Scripture as found in the book of Joel. You don't need to try to look it up, because I'm going to call attention to just a couple of verses when I get toward the end of the chapter. I'm going to break in at verse 21 of the 2nd chapter of the book of Joel. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord has done marvelous things. Do not be afraid, you beasts of the field, for the open pastures are springing up, and the tree bears its fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their strength. Be glad then, you children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you the former rain faithfully, and he will cause the rain to come down for you, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month. The threshing floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with new oil and wine. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust have eaten, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, and the chewing locust, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and the praise in the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be put to shame. Then you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and the Lord your God, and there is no other. My people shall never be out of shame. And it shall come to pass, these are our text words, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams, and the young men shall see visions. And also on my maidservants and on my manservants I will pour out my Spirit in those days. Joel chapter 2. I chose to read from this Bible. I no longer use it because it's sort of coming apart, but it's the Bible I used part of the time that I was here during those 30 years. I noticed it was given to me in 1991 by Fred Harris, and it's been with me ever since, and I wanted to bring it with me this morning. Most generations, organizations, institutions, and movements begin with a dream on the part of those who are involved in them. At times that dream is like the hand-sized cloud over the sea that may seem ever so small in the beginning, but those able to see it refuse to give up or to give in. The result is a realized dream. Christopher Columbus had a dream of lands beyond the vast unsailed oceans, but seen and unclaimed. Today, you and I mow grass and plant trees on what Christopher Columbus was looking for. The early colonists had a dream of a country free of the motherland, where men and women could worship as they chose without interference from powers that be, the established church or anyone else. Today, you and I worship in a place where we do because of their dream. Henry Ford had a dream of a horseless carriage of all things, powered by a gasoline engine instead of a cantankerous horse. Today you and I ride around in Henry's dream. The Wright brothers had a dream, the dream of flying through the air like a bird. Today we traverse the earth because of Wilbur and Oliver's dream. Reverend Jeremiah Moore, an early preacher here in Virginia, had a dream of a Baptist witness in what was then but a wilderness on this side of the Potomac River. Today, you and I gather to worship in celebration of Brother Jeremiah's dream back then. Many movements, organizations, and institutions, I contend, begin with a dream on the part of someone, even though it might have seemed ever so small back then, the size of a man's hand over the sea. But you don't need to go back that far to realize an example of a dream. As we gather here on South Washington Street to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Downtown Baptist Church, we do so to realize the fulfillment of another dream, because this church was born and bred in the briar patch of a dream come true. For those of you who may not know the whole story, let me fill in some of the blanks for you. The First Baptist Church of Alexandria, Virginia built this building where we are today, in the year of 1829. But a fire caused damage and it had to be rebuilt in 1830. They remained on this site until the mid-1950s, when they moved to their new location on Upper King Street, where they remain today. Aware that the downtown area of Alexandria would now be without a Southern Baptist witness, a little handful of First Baptist members dreamed of continuing a Baptist witness where the gospel light might continue to shine forth from this site. The buildings had been abandoned and were in the hands of the contractor who built the new building on Upper King Street. And such an idea of them occupying, establishing a new church in this old building was indeed but a dream. But a handful of those people, and when I say that, it was a handful of those people, dared to dream. And that is exactly what they did. They dared to dream on. They continued to dream when logic said it's no use. Pursuing such a possibility was nothing but a dream, they were told. Not to be deterred, they still dared to dream. They began to visualize what was invisible, and I know that's not a word. They began to see the unseeable. In due time, other dreamers joined them to pursue their dream, and therein is one of the oft overlooked factors regarding dreamers and their dreams. Dreaming is contagious. It's catching. Those daring to dream will find that other dreamers will join them in pursuit of their dream if they remain committed to the dream. And that is exactly what happened here on South Washington Street. The dream that began in the hearts and minds of those few dreamers, and I mean they were few, began to swell as other dreamers joined them in pursuit of their dream. As with Elijah's cloud that was ever so small at first, they began to dream on in the hearts and minds of those dreamers of that which would someday become visible. The snowflake was beginning to take the size of a snowball. Which brings us to another characteristic of dreamers and dreams. Not only is dreaming contagious, but dreamers also bring to their cause a high level of commitment as they pursue the fulfillment of their dream. They don't seem to worry a whole lot about the sacrifice of time, effort, or money, for their only concern seems to be their realization of a dream. And this I can illustrate for you. Those involved in the early days of Downtown Baptist Church and the occupancy of these abandoned buildings realized that a lot of elbow grease would be needed to get the buildings ready for use again. Inasmuch as funds were limited, listen to this, and some of their children are here this morning. Some of those old town ladies got down on their hands and knees and scrubbed the floors of this building to get it back in a usable shape for the new church that was going to be built here. Things needed cleaning, things needed remodeling, the building needed everything. And they did that with little thought about the sacrifice involved because they were pursuing their dream. Thus my point. Dreamers bring a high level of commitment to the fulfillment of their dreams, as reflected in the sacrifices those early dreamers were willing to make. Which brings me to a third characteristic of dreamers and their dreams. As already pointed out, dreaming is contagious, and dreamers usually bring a high level of commitment to their cause. But dreamers are a people of bulldog determination, or if you prefer, people of great conviction. And they have these convictions because they believe in their cause. By nature, dreamers refuse to give up or to give in. We see this illustrated in my previous reference to the experience of Elijah and his dream. Having received a word from God that the country would be without rain for more than 3 years, Elijah, the man of God, shared this with wicked King Ahab and his conniving wife Jezebel. After 3 rainless years that caused a desperate need for rain, Elijah went to a mountain overlooked the Mediterranean Sea in what is now modern Haifa in Israel, where he fell on his face before God and began to pray for the much needed rain. After a time, he sent his servant to the seaside it overlooked to get a weather report. That was before Noah. When the servant reported back that the sky was as clear as a bell, Elijah prayed on. He repeated his weather check with the same man on 5 different times after that. Refusing to give up, Elijah prayed on. After 6 fruitless reports from Elijah's servant that there was no sign of weather or a cloud or anything, the servant came back and said, "Yes, Elijah, there's a cloud out there over the sea, but it's only as big as a man's hand." Elijah said, pack the suitcase, we're going to pull out of here. It's going to rain. And that's when Elijah realized that it was going to rain. And it did rain. But you see, it was in response to his prayer because one man refused to give up. The tenacity, the commitment, the sacrifice, holding on when it seemed so hopeless. So it was with the founding dreamers here on South Washington Street 60 years ago. Obstacle after obstacle appeared in their pathway, but they refused to give up or let go. Like Jacob of old, who had that wrestling match with God, they were not about to give up until God blessed them. And so it was that those dreamers were indeed determined. What I've shared with you being true on June the 15th, 1954, the dreamer's dream became a reality when the Downtown Baptist Church of Alexandria was officially organized. What began as a dream in the hearts and minds of a few, in due time, was shared by others. To paraphrase Shakespeare on that midsummer day, in June of '54, a long-awaited dream became a reality. And it was realized because someone or several someones began to share a dream. They were all committed to the fulfillment of the dream, and they pursued it with bulldog tenacity. But everything began with a hand-sized dream in the hearts and minds of a handful of dreamers. Dreams, however, are like the waves of a sea. They rise and they fall. They come and they go. At times they pound against the bulkheads of our minds and hearts with a storm-driven tenacity, making it impossible for us to forget or to overlook them. But then come those times when the dreams fade and begin to disappear, when the impact of the dream is no longer what it was in the beginning. Once again, history is our best teacher. When Moses appeared before the Pharaoh of Egypt demanding the freedom of God's people, they really got excited. After 400 years of bondage in Egypt land, they were ready for freedom. Freedom was on the horizon for them. And it was in that moment a dream was born in the hearts of God's ancient people. The dream to be free again. The mere thought of such freedom awakened a spark in their sparkless hearts. And as a result of that, something happened. When they came up against the challenging waters of the Red Sea, they pressed on in pursuit of their dream. When enemies and obstacles stood in their pathway, they pressed on in pursuit of their dream. When they ran out of water and food in the desert, they pressed on in pursuit of their dream. When they encountered the elements of nature, they pressed on in pursuit of their dream. When the grumblers and the negativists raised their voices in protest, they pressed on in pursuit of their dream. In due time, however, the inevitable happened. Little by little, the vision of a dream that once burned brightly in their hearts began to weaken and fade. The impact of their dream began to wither. When the 12 spies were sent to check out the long-desired promised land and returned with a negative report involving giants in the land that made continued pursuit of their dream impossible, with this information they had, they reached a very sad conclusion. Dream or no dream, they could not go on. They considered that the decision they previously made to leave Egypt must have been an erroneous decision. Perhaps they had misinterpreted the will of God. Maybe God did not want them in the promised land after all. Better to live in Egypt's brickyards than to be dead in the land of Canaan. So they must have concluded. Having come to that decision, their dream died. And they spent the next 40 years of their lives wandering aimlessly in the desert of uncertainty. And therein is a never-to-be-forgotten truth as far as dreams and dreamers are concerned. And the truth is this: a dream is like love, in that it must never be taken for granted. A dream is like a lamp, in that the fuel supply must constantly be checked and replaced. A dream is like life itself, in that it needs nurture, nourishment, and tender, loving care if it is to survive. Simply put, once a dream becomes a reality and comes to life, it must be kept alive. And dreams are kept alive by additional faithful dreamers. It happened that way with God and His people. When they abandoned their dream at Kadesh Barnea on the banks of the promised land, God in essence said to them, all right, if that's the way you want it, that's the way it's going to be. The dream will not die, but non-dreamers will. When that happens, I will raise up a new generation of believers and dreamers who will recapture and rekindle the dream of your forefathers. And that is exactly what happened. Biblical scholars may have a more profound way of explaining it, but in my mind, this is what happened during that 40-year sojourn of the people as they wandered aimlessly in the desert. God was simply using that time to raise up a new generation of dreamers. The application of the truth at this point is too evident to be missed. 60 years ago, a dream was born here on South Washington Street in Old Town Alexandria. The exact date was June 15, 1954, the birth date of Downtown Baptist Church. For 60 years, that dream has been lived out and pursued by those people that God sent this way, including many of you in the room this morning. I shall forever be grateful that God, in His graciousness, allowed the Bowen family to be part of this dream for the 30 years of those 60 years that we were here. As we pause to celebrate anniversary number 60 of Downtown Baptist Church, we might ask if God still has something to say to those who are still here holding the fort on South Washington Street. I believe that God does. He does indeed have a message for you, and His message to you and for you is a very simple one. Yours is a challenge to keep the dream alive. Others before you dreamed the dream, pursued it with bulldog tenacity, and as a result, saw their dream become reality in the establishment of this church. But God now has a new dream, a new challenge for those of you who make up the fellowship called Downtown. And the challenge is for you to keep the dream alive. For that to happen, you must never take the dream for granted. You must never let the oil run out of your lantern or your dream. And for this to happen, you must support your dream with a vision and commitment of those dreamers of years gone by. The question of the hour is therefore a very simple question. As we pause to celebrate birthday number 60, what will it take to keep your dream alive in these days to come? Others before you dared to dream, and they lived to see the dream fulfilled. What is God's will and God's plan for you as a church in the days ahead? Having been a part of this church for 30 of those 60 years, I would like to try to answer the question for you as best I'm able to do. First and foremost, to keep the dream alive in the days ahead, you must redream the dream. That is, you must give God the chance to show you what His will is for you in the days to come as you pursue and as you desire His church in this place in the days to come. As you well realize, Alexandria of 1954 is not the Alexandria of 2014. To face these challenges and changes, you must dare to redream again. To be the church God would have you to be, you must dare to ask, what will it take for us to maintain a vibrant witness for the Lord here on South Washington Street? What kind of church and what kind of people must we be to do church in the changing society in which we live? To maintain a vibrant witness in the city, you must redream the dream. With eyes of faith, you must see the unseeable, that you must do in order that you might do the undoable. For that is exactly what happened to the hearts and minds of those who dared to dream back in 1954.